In a world where unexpected alliances can change the course of history, a silent partnership is gaining shape in the Far East and begins to worry the greatest military strategist on the planet. On the one hand, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, facing international sanctions, political isolation, and a dragged war in Ukraine. On the other hand, Kim Jong-un, supreme North Korea leader, for decades isolated from the international scene, but with a voracious appetite for war technology and military recognition. The union between these two authoritarian leaders is forming something that many experts already call a new military superpower in Asia, and perhaps even in the world. The turning point of this alliance began with the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Russia, in the face of a longer and more complex war than expected, began to face serious logistical difficulties. Scarce ammunition, committed supplies, increasing human losses. In this vacuum of needs, North Korea saw a rare opportunity to get out of the shadows. While the West strengthened Ukraine with financial support and state-of-the-art weapons, Kim Jong-un made discreet samples to Moscow, offering exactly what Putin needed most: projectiles, missiles, and surprisingly soldiers. In return, North Korea began to receive not only basic goods such as fuel and food, but also something even more precious to the Kim regime: access to advanced military technologies. This silent exchange began a climb of modernization that few predicted. In a matter of months, North Korea now exhibits armaments that we previously only saw in first-rate powers. Drones equipped with artificial intelligence, shielded with target acquisition systems, supersonic cruise missiles, and warships equipped with unpublished platforms. This transformation is so significant that South Korean analysts began to speak of a true golden age for Kim's regime. What was once a lagged army, with equipment inherited from the last century, is now beginning to show technological muscles, driven by the strategic partnership with Moscow. And we're not just talking about weapons. North Korean soldiers, hitherto without experience in real combat since the end of the Korea War, began to gain field. Increasingly solid information indicates that these troops participated initially hidden in military operations in Western Russia, especially in the Kursk region, one of the most contested areas of the conflict. Kremlin's admission that Pyongyang troops were fundamental in the resumption of positions occupied by Ukrainian forces marks a point of non-return in this alliance. This is no longer a punctual help. It is an active, direct, and strategic participation. And the most alarming, these North Korean troops are still on the field, with no withdrawal forecast. This paves the way for a possibility that would recently seem absurd: a joint offensive with Russian and North Korean soldiers invading new areas of Ukraine in the next spring and summer offensive. This partnership also inaugurated a new phase in Kim's ambitions. During a visit to the Far East Russian in September 2023, Kim would have presented Putin a kind of wish list, a list of desires composed of technologies that his regime considers essential to reaching a new military level. And this list began to fulfill quickly. In June 2024, Putin returned the visit, personally going to Pyongyang, sealing an alliance that once seemed unlikely. It is estimated that, since then, about 15,000 North Korean soldiers have crossed the border towards Russia. On the opposite way, Moscow continues to send critical technologies for the development of advanced weaponry systems. For a regime that for decades struggled to keep its missiles running and its tanks in motion, this exchange is like a breath of life and a dangerous impetus towards the top of the global military threat chain. As this military alliance evolves, which was once just punctual support became a continuous and increasingly sophisticated exchange. Since mid-2023, Kim Jong-un has intensified his visits to military factories, naval shipyards, and ballistic testing centers. Accompanied by Russian engineers and military counselors sent by Moscow, he personally supervises every advance. In a few months, North Korea has operated new models of extended range, greater accuracy, and, in some cases, satellite guiding technology, something that the Pyongyang regime could never develop alone. But perhaps the most alarming point was the introduction of a totally new war destroyer, capable of release missiles similar to the dreaded Russian Zircon, a hypersonic projectile, capable of flying at speeds above Mach 8, virtually impossible to intercept by conventional defense systems. The vessel, baptized with a symbolic name, Juche 9, was revealed in an internal event, far from the international spotlight. However, Leaked images show an advanced structure, with stealth design and modern radar system, characteristics common to the marine of countries such as China and the United States. The message was clear. North Korea no longer wants to look like an amateur force. She wants to be feared. Of course, not everything is victories. During the first tests of the new destroyer, sources report that the vessel had critical technical failures. In a maneuver in the Sea of Japan, the vessel would have lost stability and partially sunk, which led to the arrest of several officers involved in the project. Kim, known for his extreme rigidity, did not tolerate failure. Internal repression increased. South Korean intelligence sources point out that more than 40 engineers and officers were severely punished, some even missing. This reveals not only the pressure within the regime, but also the urgency of making this partnership with Russia manage concrete and fast results. Meanwhile, joint military exercises between the two countries do not stop. In March 2024, more than 1,000 North Korean soldiers participated in electronic war simulations alongside specialized Russian units. These maneuvers included the use of AI-equipped kamikaze drones, satellite interference and communications block, typical tactics of the modern war. This type of training had never been accessible to the North Korean army, which represents a huge qualitative leap in its ability to respond and attack. The joint training also extended to medium-range naval and missile forces, focusing on possible conflict theaters in Asia-Pacific. In parallel, Russia has systematically ignored the sanctions imposed by the UN against Pyongyang. And not just that, Moscow, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, now openly operates against the resolutions she has helped to approve in previous years. It is a diplomatic turn of historical proportions. What was once a caution stance has now become deliberate support. Recent UN reports show that oil shipments, weapons, and even ballistic tracking software are being sent from Russia to North Korea through camouflaged routes in the Okhotsk Sea and East Siberia. This support is generating visible fruits. The North Korean army began production in series of new armored, with lighter design and better mobility. Tests of a new intercontinental ballistic missile have also been recorded, which, according to analysts, can reach targets in the United States more accurately. And to complete this scenario, Kim Jong-un recently visited a highly restricted naval base on the East Coast, where he supervised the boarding of experimental warheads, possibly with nuclear-in Romeo-type submarines, now modernized with Russian assistance. The climb is clear. Kim, who has been treated as an isolated and almost folk tyrant, is now being repositioned on the world board as a strategic, armed, experienced, and much broader aspirations. And this new status is not limited to the Korean peninsula. There are signs, not yet officially confirmed, that part of the modern weaponry tested by Pyongyang was sent to pro-Russian militias in Donbass and even sold to African countries in conflict through Russian intermediaries. North Korea, therefore, begins to cease to be just a regional burden to becoming a geopolitical instrument used by Russia to tension the global balance. It is a new phase of an old conflict, but with new weapons, experienced soldiers, and an alliance that already impacts far beyond the Ukraine territory. And it is precisely on the grounds of war in Ukraine that the partnership between Russia and North Korea shows its most dangerous aspect. Sources of Western intelligence indicate that at least 15,000 North Korean soldiers are already in Russian territory, many of them strategically positioned in the Kursk region. Officially, Kremlin does not confirm, but satellite images, intercepted communications, and deserted videos suggest that Kim troops are participating directly in the combat, especially on logistic support fronts, trenches, and rear lines. This movement has a double impact. In addition to relieving pressure on exhausted Russian soldiers after years of war, the North Korean military is a real experience in modern combat, something the country has not seen since the Korean War in the 1950s. Exposure to the practical use of advanced artillery, electronic drones, and hybrid tactics transforms the profile of Pyongyang army. They are learning to war in the 21st century and learning from the Russians directly on the battlefield. In addition, sources close to the Russian Ministry of Defense point out that Kim Jong-un has received limited but growing access to sensitive technologies. Among them would be encrypted communication systems, satellite tracking software, and, in an unconfirmed way, information about nuclear weapons. This does not necessarily mean that North Korea will receive Russian warheads. but suggests that the Pyongyang regime may be learning to adapt its existing nuclear capacity to be used at sea, something unprecedented and extremely dangerous. Kim's ambition seems to go beyond mere national defense. He is in a hurry. Each visit to shipyards and military factories is accompanied by internal advertisements showing the leader as a global strategist, a great powers partner and defender of Asian sovereignty. The image of an isolated man, surrounded by sanctions, is being replaced by a more aggressive profile, that of a pragmatic military chief who negotiates, modernizes, punishes, and repositions before the world with real weapons and support from a superpotence in war. This accelerated transformation raises a crucial question. What will be the next step? North Korea is preparing for much more than defending itself. There are signs that, with Russian support, Kim could start regional offensive actions, either to press South Korea, threaten Japan, or reinforce its influence on vital maritime routes in the Pacific. The recent announcement of the construction of a new fleet of tactical submarines, capable of carrying ballistic missiles, only increases these suspicions. In the diplomatic field, the approach between Russia and North Korea generates discomfort not only in Washington and Seoul, but also in Beijing. China, no matter how welcomed any distraction that weakens the US and its allies, observes with concern to Kim's growing independence, which now no longer depends on Chinese support. Russia, in this sense, has become a new hub of direct influence, and Kim can explore it very well, playing with the geopolitical rivalries around him. All this happens in the shadow of international sanctions. Worse, with the connivance of one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. It is a dangerous paradox. While the UN maintains resolutions that prohibit any transfer of military weaponry or technology to North Korea, Russia openly ignores them. And, being a permanent member with veto power, Moscow prevents any harder action from the Council. This completely undermines the credibility of the international bodies and paves the way for other authoritarian regimes to be inspired by this model of resistance and mutual cooperation on the margin of the world order. Today, what we see is the emergence of a new global threat. Kim Jong-un is no longer just an eccentric and unpredictable dictator. He is now a relevant, well-armed, trained military actor with access to strategic technologies and willing to openly challenge the international system. And it's not alone. It has by its side Vladimir Putin, weakened by sanctions, but still powerful, cunning, and willing to any alliance that can unbalance the board. The combination of these two leaders, one in search of international redemption, another in search of regional dominance, is forming an alternative military superpower in the heart of Asia. An alliance without breaks, without ethical limits, and with a very clear goal: to change the global balance by force. And while the world tries to deal with multiple crises, this partnership advances in silence, testing missiles, forcing destroyers, training soldiers, and consolidating something that, until a few years ago, seemed impossible. A North Korea that not only resists, but expands.